What if the Bible wasn't about one God, but two? This is titled The Two Gods of the Bible. When I look at the Bible, I don't just see one God. I see two completely opposite beings. And the whole system is built to keep you from admitting that. You'll accept flat earth, firmament, giants, Nephilim, aliens, even Tartaria. But the one thing nobody will accept is that the Bible itself is showing you two different gods. That's the final box. That's the programming line. That's the Metatronic algorithm at work. Look closely. The God of the Old Testament demands obedience, blood, and fear. Do this or be destroyed, or obey or be cursed. He tells entire nations to be wiped out, women and children slaughtered. He rains fire, floods, plagues, and famine. He says, I am a jealous God. He sets up law after law after law, 613 commands. It's all control. That's the signature of the Metatronic inversion. But the New Testament, what do we see? We kill the Son of God, the highest act of rebellion against heaven, and what does he do? Does he rain vengeance? Does he send fire from the sky? He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That right there is the dividing line. One God demands obedience and punishes rebellion with blood. The other God absorbs rebellion and answers with forgiveness and love. How can you possibly say these are the same God? The Old Testament says an eye for an eye. The New Testament says turn the other cheek. The old, kill your enemies. The new, love your enemies, bless those who curse you. The old, sacrifice animals endlessly. The new, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. One God says, fear me. The other says, perfect love casts out fear. One God says, vengeance is mine. The other says, forgive 70 times 7. One God says, I will bless your land if you obey me. The other says, the kingdom is within you. The Bible itself is showing two opposite currents. The Metatronic God of law, fear, and blood, and the Christos source of love, freedom, and life. One is a feedback loop. The other is the spiral of expansion. One is an algorithm of control. The other is gnosis and resurrection. And here's the kicker. Most believers, even those who claim to see the deception, still cling to the idea that it's all one God. They'll accept giants, firmament, fallen angels, even cycles of ages. But the moment you say the Old Testament God is not the same as the Father revealed by Christ, that's where the trap springs. That's the box. That's the program that says you can question everything, but not that. So I'll tell you ahead of time. I know exactly what you're going to do. You'll dismiss it. You'll say, no, it's just one God with two sides. You'll reboot it in your mind before it even has a chance to land. Why? Because to admit this truth means admitting you've been wrong. It means looking in the mirror, and most people would rather do anything than that, which is the truth. But it's undeniable. Imagine two identical twin brothers. One lives like Jesus and Buddha combined, healing, forgiving, laying down his life for others. The other lives like Cortez, slaughtering nations, demanding obedience, ruling through terror. If I told you those were the same person, you'd laugh in my face. And yet, when it comes to the Bible, you'll collapse them together and call it one God. That's the deception. That's the programming. And history repeats it. The Aztecs thought Cortez was Quetzalcoatl returned. They mistook a bloodthirsty conqueror for their God. Just like today, people mistake the jealous destroyer for the creator. It's the same trick. Power wearing the mask of divinity and people defending it because they've been taught power equals God. Look at the blood trail. The pyramids of South America soaked in human sacrifice. The pagan shrines of Baal and Moloch demanding children burned alive. The Indus blood rituals of Babylon and Canaan. The Old Testament God demanding lambs, bulls, goats, rivers of blood. It's all the same current, the downward spiral divinity of death disguised as holiness. And then comes Jesus. And for the first time in history, the message is no more. No more obedience contracts, no more sacrifices, no more fear. You are sons, not slaves. The kingdom is within you. For the first time in history, people didn't have to go through the system to reach the afterlife. That's why the Christos message spread like wildfire. It shattered the monopoly. It broke the death machine's control. So what did Rome do? They hijacked it. They fused the Old Testament God into the New Testament gospel, called it all one book, and enforced it with blood. They wiped out whole peoples, burned libraries, massacred cultures. They turned the cross of forgiveness into a sword of empire. They buried the Christos message under the Metatronic machine, and they anchored it physically. The Vatican, the so-called Holy City, is built on Vanicus Hill, named for ancient prophetic cults tied to the Etruscan deity Vaticus, the god of the first cry. Beneath it were pagan shrines, including temples to Apollo and Cybele, alongside necropolises and sacrificial grounds, not erased but absorbed, to harness the energy of death and prophecy for empire. Literally, Vatican built on top. The same pattern appears in America when Rockefeller orchestrated the creation of the Federal Reserve. He didn't just choose Jekyll Island by chance. He had a building erected directly on top of an ancient native sacrificial site, a shrine of blood long before the bankers ever gathered. Only after it was created did he bring the other elites in secret, so secret they didn't even tell their wives where they were going. And in that death-soaked chamber, they gave birth to the Federal Reserve, the financial throne of the New World. And it appears in England, the city of London. The financial core of the old empire is built over the ancient cultic grounds of the Thames, a river that archaeologists have found filled with thousands of human skulls, ritual deposits, and sacrificial remains. Beneath modern skyscrapers lies the Temple of Mithras, a Roman blood cult where initiates were bathed in gore of slain bulls. St. Paul's Cathedral itself was planted on Ludgate Hill, where Roman temples once stood, echoing with blood offerings to Diana and Jupiter, London's financial throne. Like Rome's spiritual throne, and America's military throne was seated on sacrificial foundations from the very beginning. This is the three-city system of empire. Vatican, the spiritual throne, rooted in prophetic shrines and blood sacrifice. London, financial throne, rooted in skull rivers and Mithraic blood cults. And DC, military throne, birthed through a financial engine founded in native sacrificial chambers. Three pillars of the same machine: spirit, money, sword, a counterfeit trinity anchored into the downward spiral of power. Because here's the truth: there's no such thing as a dark Christ field. Christ is the upward spiral of life, the eternal resurrection current of source. What we're seeing is something else: the manipulation of the human Merkaba. Every human carries a Merkaba, a star tetrahedron living light in the chest, the toroidal geometry that makes incarnation possible. This Merkaba is a six-dimensional gift, the engine of sentience itself, and runs as a spiral. When we live in the lower chakras, survival, lust, control, fear, the Merkaba spiral turns downward. It collapses into the density looping feedback, Metatronic grids, the Jehovian mindset. When we live in the higher chakras, heart, voice, vision, crown, the Merkaba spiral spins upward. It rises in forgiveness, creativity, harmony, and co-creation. That's the force of existence. Two spirals, two currents. The downward spiral, Jehovian control, looping fear, death disguised as holiness. The upward spiral, Christos expansion, forgiveness, love, resurrection. And just like Star Wars revealed, no one is locked forever into one path. Entire soul lineages may learn downward for ages, but they can change. A Christos soul can stumble into a loop. Jehovian soul can rise into love. Do you see it now? The Bible is not one God speaking, it's two. One jealous destroyer, the warlord of obedience and fear. The other, the forgiving Father revealed in Christ, who shatters a loop and brings life. One is Cortez, the other is Christ. One the downward spiral, the other is eternal spiral of resurrection. And I know most of you will hear this and immediately dismiss it. Not because the evidence isn't here, it's overwhelming, but because you're afraid of losing the illusion. You're afraid of admitting you've been wrong. That's the algorithm. That's the loop. Have a great night. Namaste.